Piper is a guardian ad litem who defends like they defend mostly children, but there's elderly and those that are mentally or physically disabled and can't defend themselves in court. Guardians will come in and defend them. I'm a big Batman fan. I love Batman, and so I read this great book on the psychology of Batman, and one of the things they were saying is that the reason Bruce Wayne can't have relationships is because Bruce Wayne is actually the mask. Batman is who he is, because Bruce Wayne died the moment he saw his parents get murdered. And so that moment is the most important in the entire Batman arc, is when his parents are dead and the police show up. And the first thing that actually happens is the cops are like, oh, the poor little billionaire orphan got his parent, and they're being really degrading. But Jim Gordon comes up and he puts his coat around Bruce Wayne and holds him and lets him cry and takes him back to the station. And so in that moment, Bruce Wayne could have went one or the other way. He could have become the Joker, or he could have become Batman, and Jim Gordon's kindness pushed him to becoming Batman. So I had that scene in my head, and I wanted to write something like that, and I thought a Guardian would be perfect for that, because a Guardian really is, sometimes the Guardian's the only person looking out for that kid.
This week I got to talk with Victor Methos about his newest thriller, The Silent Watcher, which is a pulse-pounding legal thriller for sure. I was burning through the pages on this one, so if you do pick it up, be prepared to clear your schedule. But here's what it's about. Far from the neon glare of the Vegas Strip, attorney Piper Danes walks away from a hotshot law firm to work as a guardian ad litem. Piper was once a vulnerable youth herself, and a gal, G-A-L, gave her hope when she needed it most. Now she's committed to paying it forward. Her first case is unlike any. 15-year-old Sophie Grace is the sole survivor of a gruesome family murder. Teaming up with the formidable Judge Hope Dawson and enigmatic Detective Lazarus Holloway, Piper delves into a world more sinister than she could have imagined. Their hunt for the truth leads to a serial killer known only as the Creeper, a predator who hides in the shadows. But as the team inches closer to unveiling the murder, they find themselves in the crosshairs. Trapped in a web of lies, Piper will do anything to protect Sophie and stop the killer before she becomes his next victim. There was so many cool themes that get explored in this, and then also just a truly creepy killer at the center of it. So if you are a fan of, I would even say like Fatal Intrusion that I read earlier this year, then this one is for you. That being said, let's talk with Victor. So I am so excited to talk about The Silent Watcher, but I did want to get to know a little bit about you first before we dive into it.
Mm-hmm.
So what was the moment where you knew you wanted to write a book, or that like you wanted to be an author?
I was in 5th grade, I think, and I wrote my first short story.
Nice.
And it was just a catharsis. Like, writing is just so, there's a few creative processes that really just pull your emotions out and just put them out into the world, so they're not just clinging to you. It's almost like energy gets stuck in you. And for me, writing is probably the primary thing that moves that energy and gets it out of me. So I recognized that in 5th grade, and I've been writing pretty much the ever since. I mean, on and off a little bit, but in college I used to write short stories and sell them to magazines when they were still a thing. When magazines still existed. And so, you'd make 25 or $50 a short story, and I'd go buy Top Ramen. So writing's always been there for me.
Yes. Yeah, that's awesome. I love when people are like, I've really just known since I was a kid. I've known forever.
Yeah. What I tell my kids is it's better to fail at something you love than to succeed at something you hate. I would way rather be a poor writer than like a billionaire. Like there's a lot of billionaires that I looked at their schedule, and it's like they wake up at 5 and they don't go to bed till like 10 or 11, and they're just doing stuff all day that they don't really want to do. That's not worth it for me. There's no amount of money that would make me do that.
Right. Yeah, I'm with you. I love that. So I saw in your bio you were also a criminal and civil rights lawyer as well. Just tried a lot of cases. Mm-hmm. How does your work in that influence your books?
Oh, a ton. I mean, you meet the most. I was a prosecutor first and then a defense attorney. Mm. I had this federal judge tell me once, and I think he's absolutely right. He's like, anybody that does criminal law, they should be a defense attorney for a couple of years and a prosecutor for a couple of years. So they get to see both sides, which I really got to do. I got to see what the cops go through and like the emotional toll and all that stuff. But I also got to see just average citizens. Evil people, maybe I'm just an optimist, but evil people are pretty rare.
Yeah.
Like I could count on one hand the actual amount of evil people I read. Most of us are just impulsive and stupid. And so 99% of my clients were just impulsive and stupid. Like
Yes.
so it really helps influence my writing that way because I don't see everybody as evil and I don't see all the cops as good either. I've dealt with a ton of
Right.
corrupt cops. As a civil rights lawyer, that's what I did is sue police officers and man, some of the stuff is
Wow.
just like I wouldn't trust you to be a dog catcher, much less have a gun walking around
Oh my,
arresting people. So it's definitely colored. I've gotten to see both sides in a way that if you just work one side, you can't see. So that's really influenced
yeah.
my writing a ton.
That's really, I love that answer because yeah, I've just been feeling that way. The more I've like grown a community on Bookstagram, I'm like, people don't suck. It's just some people. And so then sometimes we get so in our minds and we're like, oh, people. And it's like, no, like most people are pretty cool to talk to if you can like talk to them about something they're interested in. And that whole idea that like there are very few who are actually evil. I just really love that. It was reminding me we saw the movie American Fiction earlier this year,
Oh
and
yeah, I
there's
love that movie.
some,
Yeah,
oh, it was so good.
yeah.
But there was some line in it about how like an author needs to like something about how authors need to be like completely empathetic because they have to be able to make characters that do have flaws and they don't like hate the character for it or even like judge the character for it. And it
Yeah.
kind of sounds like that's kind of like how you got both perspectives on a lot of stuff. It's like you don't see everything as like black and white might help as a writer.
Oh yeah. No, it's. I mean, yeah. There's clients I had. I remember a prosecutor. There's this guy, really nice guy, but he was a cop and then a prosecutor.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and he was really like railing against my client, this lady, about how dare she do this and how dare she do that. And I just told him her history when she was raped by her dad until she was 13 when she was too old. And he threw her out in the streets and she had to prostitute herself. And so I got her as a client at 21. And I was just like to the prosecutor, like, how dare you, man? Go through the shit she went through
Right.
and then tell me how easy it is to judge somebody. And so it's
Yes.
really cool that I can kind of bring that to the table. I know what the prosecutor's thinking. He's just looking at the law and the facts, but he's not really seeing her as
Right.
human. So the fact that I was a prosecutor first, I could bring that out and like, well, here's why she did what she did. And so yeah,
Yeah.
it's been really cool that way. And just talking to like, man, when you do criminal law, you meet the most interesting people.
I bet.
I've defended a lot of celebrities and politicians, and I get to
Oh
hear
yeah.
kind of the backroom stuff, and that's been pretty cool too.
Yeah. Yeah. I bet that's very a very inspiring part of the job, maybe storytelling wise.
Sure, yeah, yeah. I tell everybody that wants to be a lawyer, like go into criminal law. It's by far the funnest field.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, it sounds more interesting than business mergers and whatever that version of
Oh man,
law
when
is that we think looks cool on TV.
no, it is not for me.
Yeah.
Those guys, I
Yeah.
did a few civil cases, and I would pick up the phone, and they would literally be yelling on the other end before it got to my ear. And I was like,
Oh
"Yes,
my
screw that." But
gosh.
like prosecutors and cops and defense attorneys, we all hang out and we go get beers and we eat lunch together and stuff. So it's more like
Right.
workers in the same factory. It kind of feels like.
Yeah.
Whereas
Yeah.
civil law, they're just like, "Oh man, they're such jerks."
Oh, well, note to anyone who's thinking about going into law.
Yeah, go into criminal law. You'll have fun.
Yeah. Um, so I've kind of a two-part question for the next one. One, I saw in your bio that you put out 2 books a year, which is impressive. So one, do you have a secret to doing that? And then two, the other question is like, what is your writing process like? So I'm sure that kind of answers both of those questions together.
Yeah, I typically write more than that. I have other pen names as well,
Oh,
one for
wow.
science fiction and one for horror. I started in science fiction and horror and then kind of evolved into mystery. So I still write those. But for me, writing, I mean, I've done it so long. It's like anything else. People are like, I've known some chess grandmasters that could walk by a board and just say mate in seven, right? And I used to think like, wow, those guys are so much smarter than me. But now I just realize that's their thing that they're obsessed with.
Mm,
That's what they think
mhm.
about all day. So I do that with fiction and writing. So for me, it's just become my thing. I usually just
Yeah,
now at this point, I just sit in a room and I listen to my characters talk and I write down what they say. So I
that
don't
is
do
so
any outlining or anything like that. If I know how
wow.
a book's going to end, I won't write it. It'll be too boring for me. I have
Oh,
severe
okay.
ADD, so it's
Right?
got to stay
Yeah.
exciting. I don't know the backgrounds of my characters. Like in this book, I had no idea what the background were of Piper and
Wow.
Lazarus. I just kind of came up with it as I wrote. And one of the things that's influenced that is I used to not like abstract art, right? I was like, a 6-year-old can
Mm,
do this. What's the,
right.
Da Vinci and Raphael instead. But I read this book on abstract art because I wanted to know more about it. And it said in the
Mhm.
first chapter, it completely changed my mind. It said, there is no such thing as randomness when it comes to the mind. So the more random
Mhm.
you try to be, the more you're actually expressing your unconscious. So Jackson
Mm.
Pollock isn't splattering paint, it's his unconscious forming something out of the paint that he thinks is random. And so
Yeah.
that influenced me a lot. And I apply that to writing as well.
Yeah, that is so cool. It does intrigue me the more authors I talk to, how many people are like, I want to be just as surprised as the readers are. Like there really
Yeah,
are people that just like it, enjoy it that way.
exactly. Like who wants to, I don't know, it just gets boring for me. Then like the danger of writing is having it become like
Mhm.
work. Once it doesn't feel like
Mm.
play, when it feels like work, I'll get bored and I'll do something else. So it
Yeah.
always has to feel like play to me.
Yeah. No, that totally makes sense. So knowing that you don't totally know where you're headed with a book, was there a certain inspiration for this one?
Yeah, I usually see a scene in my head, just like one scene, and then I kind of write what came before and what came after, and it's usually the scene that
Okay.
sticks with me. So the scene in this one is Piper is a guardian ad litem who defends they defend mostly children, but there's elderly and those
Mhm.
that are mentally or physically disabled and can't defend themselves in court. Guardians will come in and defend them. So I'm a big Batman fan. I love
Nice.
Batman, and so I read this great book on the psychology of Batman, and one of the things they were
Whoa.
saying is that the reason Bruce Wayne can't have relationships is because Bruce Wayne is actually the mask. Batman is who he is, because Bruce Wayne died
Okay.
the moment he saw his parents get murdered. And so that
Mm.
moment is the most important in the entire Batman arc is when his parents are dead and the police show up. And the first thing that actually happens is the cops are like, "Oh, the poor little billionaire orphan got his parents," and they're being really
Right.
degrading. But Jim Gordon comes up and he puts his coat around Bruce Wayne and holds him and lets him cry and takes him back to the station. And so in that moment, Bruce Wayne could have went one or the other way. He could have become the Joker or he could have become
Yes.
Batman. And Jim Gordon's kindness pushed him to becoming Batman. So I had
Yeah.
that scene in my head and I wanted to write something like that. And I thought a Guardian would be perfect for that because a Guardian really is
Yes.
sometimes the Guardian's the only person looking out for that kid because their parents have lost their
Mhm.
mind and don't care
Mhm.
about the kid anymore. Because most Guardian
Yeah.
cases are divorces. And Kate, you would not
Oh,
believe what
wow.
people are willing to do to their kids in a nasty divorce. It's horrible.
Yeah.
And so these
Yeah, and
Guardians
it's
are kind of
typically to, like, get back at the spouse, like, it doesn't
oh
even
yeah,
make
I mean they'll
sense.
do. I mean they'll do anything. It's
Yeah.
so nobody hates each other like two people that were formerly in love. Like, and they
Amen to
just
that.
know what buttons to push too. Like I had a client we
Yeah.
did a divorce, and the guy's like, "I don't care about anything else. Get me the cat and the Xbox because those are the two things he loves the most."
Oh my
Like,
god.
you really want to pay my hourly fee to get an Xbox
For
for you?
those 2
Can you not
things.
just buy a new Xbox?
Yeah.
So
Oh my gosh,
yeah,
that's
people
wild.
lose their minds, and so these guardians they have a really important role of like I have to
Mhm.
do what's in the kid's best interest. Like I represent
Yeah.
only this kid and nobody else. So that always fascinated me. So I had that scene from Batman in my head, and I just kind of wrote the
Mhm.
novel around that.
That is so cool. Do you remember what the book was called? Because I just made a note that there is a book on the psychology of Batman.
I think it's literally called The Psychology of
Okay.
Batman. Yeah.
Okay. Well, I'm gonna be looking it up because that
Oh, it was
I
so fun to read.
love that.
Yeah, it
Yeah,
was cool.
and it is cool to think about those really pivotal moments in your life
Hmm.
where it's like you were saying, like he could have just gone into being consumed by anger, more the Joker route, or he could go the Batman route that he goes. And you do feel that so much with Piper,
Yeah.
even in the synopsis, that like she even had a traumatic experience herself and that someone coming alongside her made all the difference. And so then she wants to be that part of her story was reminding me of that quote that's like, be be the person you needed when you were a kid, basically.
Oh yeah.
um
Yeah.
and I just love that. I love I love the way she wants to stand up for Sophie, even when Lazarus is kind of pushing her to do some stuff. But
Yeah.
that's getting into spoiler territory.
Yeah, I've always wanted, because Guardians, one of the things Guardian and anybody that works with children in the justice system, I mean, one of the things they face a lot of is they feel like they don't make much of a difference, because you can help a kid all you want and you can start healing their trauma, and then the second the court puts them back with their abusive parents, they reverse
Yeah.
everything. And so 6 months later, the kid's back to you for a worse crime. And so I
Mhm.
wanted someone that like that won't affect them. That like that doesn't
Yeah.
slow down their passion for the job just because they don't feel like
Yes.
they're making progress. And I think Piper fit the bill on that.
Yeah. I think that you have a moment like that when somebody's even saying to her, like, isn't it something along the lines of like, isn't it depressing doing this? And she's kind of like, no, like I'm going to keep showing up for these kids. Like
Yeah.
that's enough for her, is just to be someone who's showing up for them. I really love that.
Yeah, she's a way better person than I am.
Well, same. Oh man, that was gonna be my first question. But I really did like learning about the guardian ad litem. Just in general, that there are people out there helping, like you're saying, whether it's kids or elderly who really just kind of can't advocate for themselves the best. So it was cool learning about that, and it does sound like that was like really the core part of the inspo for the book too.
Yeah, yeah, it was. I did go full CSI on it though, Kate. Like, forensic work is like some of the most boring work you will ever see. But you watch CSI and it's like an action movie. So I did
Right.
push in a little of that, because a lot of the Guardians' work is paperwork and just sitting in
Yes.
court like this, twiddling your thumbs. So
Oh,
I
I
added
bet.
a lot of excitement. So none of your listeners or anybody watching this, don't get mad at me if you become a Guardian and they're like, "What? Victor lied to me. Where's all the excitement and the car chases?"
Right. Oh well, I liked the excitement and the car chases too. But another interesting thing that, or I thought it was interesting to have it included in this book, is that like Lazarus engages in a lot of like spiritual conversations with people about religion and like what all of that means. And he's very like and I don't know if we know that he's atheist necessarily. He's a little agnostic, or like has his intellectual reasons that some of it doesn't make sense for him. So was that something you always knew was going to be a part of his personality, or was that just
No.
like you said, you were just writing?
No, I was just writing. I don't journal. I
Mm.
don't know if you there's a show where it was a writer, and his wife was trying to convince him to go to therapy, and he's like, "I'm not giving
Mhm.
that shit away for free."
Oh, that's amazing.
And so I don't journal. So everything I'm going through, everything I'm thinking about comes
Yeah.
out in my books. And so when I go back and look at some of my books, I'm like, "Oh, I remember what this is from, and I remember what this is from." And like we were
Yeah.
talking about the unconscious, it's really weird. I went back in this one book I wrote 8 or 9 years ago, and I was just kind of flipping through it, and there came this conversation between the protagonist and his father, and it was almost word for word a conversation I had with my dad before he
Wow.
passed. And I didn't like, it went through editing and months of, and I never picked up on it. And just 10
Yeah.
years later, I'm like, oh, I had that conversation. And so that's
Wow.
that's how I use fiction. And so religion's always been a big thing for me. I started studying philosophy really young, like way
Yeah.
young. And so it's always kind of stuck with me. I got my degree I was actually I was getting my PhD in philosophy when I
Oh
dropped out and
wow.
went to law school, because I saw the writing on the wall. I'm like, oh my God, I'm going to starve to death.
Yeah,
So,
right. No one
unfortunately, our
wants to pay for
society
my
does not pay
philosophical
professors very
thoughts.
much. Oh, I'm sorry, I cut you off.
Yeah.
What was that?
No, you're fine. I was just saying, like, you're like realizing, like, not tons of people are going to pay me for my understanding of philosophy.
Nobody's paying me to understand Nietzsche,
You're right.
which kind of sucks, because a lot of those grad students, they're some of the most brilliant people I ever met. And
I
I actually
bet.
read a study that was talking about IQ on college campuses, and they found that the two highest IQ undergraduate majors are found in mathematics, obviously, and philosophy. Like
That makes
really
sense.
brilliant kids, yeah. But like, there's no, like, you can't go into it. I saw a lot of them go into business or other stuff because they're
Hmm.
just like, I'm not going to be able to make it, which sucks because
Right.
we're missing out on, like, who knows what they could discover if they just devoted their lives to thought instead,
You're
or
right.
science. Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. I
That's a
saw that
really
a
good
lot in
point.
science too. A lot of my friends who were graduating with physics degrees and chemistry degrees, they started like working at banks and stuff like that and doing algorithms.
Yeah.
They didn't pursue
Yeah.
science anymore, which is really a shame.
It is. It's hard. Just like a whole bigger conversation, but it is hard with some of like, I don't know, like less capitalistic jobs, I guess is like one way to put it. Like we don't, there's not like a solution to like getting people to stay in that field because like they have to figure out how to make money too.
Yeah, I know. And it pays so little. Like my brother's a
Mhm.
teacher. He makes nothing, you know? Like it's so
Right.
weird. He's responsible and he's a special ed teacher too. Like he's
Oh,
responsible for
wow.
40 kids and just when he tells me the stuff, the benefits and all of that, I just really because in Afghanistan where I'm from, here you hear like, oh, become a doctor or a lawyer, but over there it's like become
Mhm.
a teacher because the
Yeah.
teacher is held as like the highest standard. Unfortunately,
Yeah.
there's nothing left of Afghanistan now, but that was a cool thing we used to have. So,
Right. Right. Yeah. It was I mean, going back to the religion part. It was fascinating for me because I don't know if you saw the movie Heretic that's in theaters right now.
I've heard it's good.
But oh, it is fantastic.
Oh,
And
okay.
my little tagline would be that like it's religious horror, but
Hmm.
it's not what you think of when you think of religious horror. It is all ideology and like it's very academic. I saw someone else say it's like a daringly academic horror, which I thought like really summed it
Oh,
up well too. But
hmm.
it's actually more about the horror of like how personal it is to decide what we think we believe
Hmm.
and the whole like how difficult it is to really decide, and then also showing how many different religions have like the exact same savior story, like showing how like people have been interpreting things really similar for a really long time was like a big part of the movie. I was obsessed with it. I still want to do like a long form review of it because I go to the movies typically. I
Hmm.
like go like during the like an afternoon showing when no one's there so I can take notes on my phone.
Yeah. Oh,
um,
nice.
yeah, so I just
Okay.
have all these notes because it just did it so well. But then I was reading your book as well, and so when Lazarus was talking with I think the priest,
Yeah.
where he was even saying like people who think that they're moral have still kind of adopted the morality of whatever religion is still like closer to their
Oh,
culture.
yeah. Oh, yeah.
And the
No, no.
whole Viking example, I was like, this
Yeah.
is great.
Oh, sure. No, I remember I was a waiter. It was in college. I was a waiter at this Mayan restaurant. They called it the Mayan, and they had like cliff divers and stuff. It's really interesting stuff. But anyway, across the street was this huge amphitheater where they would hold like various conferences, like business conferences.
Mm-hmm.
And so one
Mm-hmm.
day they had like the Atheists of America. So I'm like, oh, I
Okay.
gotta go see this. And I went in, and
Yes.
so there was pamphlets and literature like Christopher Hitchens books up front. And then I went in, and a band was playing, and then somebody got up and read from Richard Dawkins' book, and I was like, "Holy shit, this is church!" And none of them realize
Right.
it. None of
Yes.
them realize they're doing the exact same thing. So
Yes.
it reminds me of something Carl Jung said. He said if religion was erased today, it would start over exactly the same way tomorrow, because there's something in us that wants something more,
Yes.
that wants to believe in something more. It's just
Mm-hmm.
something I always struggle with. It's hard to be spiritual. It's definitely hard to
Mm-hmm.
be religious. There's too much of like, and then he went onto the mountain and the golden plates beacon. It's like, oh, come on,
Yep.
you know,
Yes.
just tell me how to
Yeah.
live. I just want
Yeah.
to know how to be a good person and how to live. And so it's hard because you get so much bureaucracy with it.
Right. Yeah. That's the other big part of it for me is the organized religion has just turned into like all kinds of different things. But I've always thought that was interesting too with atheists because they're actually saying they're sure of something is like the
Yeah.
other funny part. That's where like agnostic, I guess, is what would resonate with me more because like, and it's probably why I liked Heretic so much is like, I think it'll be like a lifelong journey of wondering what I think is real. And I don't know that my brain and like my personality is ever going to feel like I know for sure, which I guess is the crux of what faith is, which is also what the movie touches on. But
Oh yeah.
yeah, it's fascinating
That's
to
cool. I
just
will check that
think
out. I
about.
love horror. I'm more into
Yeah.
like 70s and 80s horror, like grindhouse
Yeah.
stuff. Just because
Hmm.
I love artists that are willing to just go out on a limb and just be like,
Yeah.
screw it. Most of those guys couldn't get any funding. They're like, screw it, I'll sell my car and I'll make it. And then they just make this
Right.
passion project, like Texas Chainsaw Massacre, Halloween, all these
Hmm.
masterpieces. I think there's something magical about an artist not having any money, not having any backing, but loving it so much they're like, I'm going to make it. I don't care. Like
Yeah.
a lot of my favorite movies are that.
That's really cool that you said that too, because I had the writer director of a movie called Oddity that came out this year.
Hmm.
I had him on. It is so good. It's
Really?
like it's like horror, thriller, like murder mystery, paranormal. Like the main character is a blind woman who, like when she touches things, like it can like feel the like people associated with it.
Yeah.
And has like an oddity shop and everything. And it's her trying to figure out her sister's brutally murdered, and she's kind of trying to figure out what happened there. But when I talked to him, it was kind of the same. We had a similar discussion because the setting is this like really creepy, like house that's like also kind of like a square house with a huge courtyard in the middle as well. But it's
Uh,
this really cool location. And I was talking to him about it, and he was like, well, I had the idea for it and my friends like own this area. And so he's made 2 movies there just because that's what was available. And he just like wanted to tell the story. So we were talking too about how sometimes limitations end up like helping you be more creative because you
mm.
can't just like do whatever you want. And I was like, that is a really interesting concept.
I think so. Actually, I remember when Twitter was only 140 characters, I thought it was way more witty and clever. And now the long form
Yes.
stuff, it's just like, yeah, it's lost some of its magic.
Yeah, that's a really good point.
Hmm.
Um, you probably didn't do it on purpose, but I did. So his name's Lazarus, and he brings up a lot of biblical issues. Do you think those were connected, or is that just like you
Oh
met him
yeah,
as a
yeah. No, I
character and he
wanted
was
him to have a
Lazarus?
yeah, I wanted him to have a religious name. I've always been fascinated with people that grow up among fanatics but decide to
Yeah.
leave. Like that has got to be one of the most painful things you can imagine, because like leaving a community that's everything to you. I mean, you leave your
Yeah.
friends, your family, they tell you you're going to hell. So yeah, I wanted a lot of religious. He's having a battle. It's a war inside of
Yeah.
him, and religion's a big part of it. So I definitely wanted a name for that.
Yeah. Yeah. I loved it. I figured it had something related to it. Also, total sidebar with him. He's like always drinking caffeinated drinks
Hmm.
and whatever. And my husband has ADHD and is like all the caffeine all day long,
Yep.
keeping him going. And there's a part at the beginning of it where like she's Piper's like looking at what he's drinking at night, and she's like, "There's so much caffeine in this. Do you sleep?" And he just answers no. And then it says like, and then he hits his vape again. And
Yeah.
I about died because my husband and I have had that same conversation so many times. I like sent it to him and he was like, well, here's my vape right here.
Yeah. Well, I don't sleep. I never have. I don't know what it is,
Oh,
but
yeah.
like if I get 4 hours, it's like a good night for me.
I
Usually
wonder
it's
if it's
about,
related to ADHD.
I don't know, 2.5, 3 hours is max for me. But
Wow.
sleep paralysis, because I gave Lazarus sleep paralysis. Uh,
Yeah.
the scary, so like I told you, I'm really into horror, Kate, and
Hmm.
I think probably the scariest horror movie I've ever seen is a documentary called The Nightmare. Have you ever seen it?
Mm-mm.
So it's about sleep paralysis. But one
Okay.
of the things that people found is that a lot of, not everybody, but a lot of people that watched it had
Uh-huh.
sleep paralysis that night. And so that's why they're like, it's so terrifying because you don't know if you're one of those people or not. And I've had
Oh,
sleep paralysis. It is
wow.
the scariest thing I think I've ever experienced, because you're awake and everything, like all your senses are attuned. You know what's going on, but you're in a nightmare that you can't get out of and you realize it. And so like, my sleep paralysis I had that one time was I saw someone beating me to death with a bat, and like I heard the wind, I felt it against my
Oh
head,
my
like it
gosh.
was just so powerful. So I've always wanted a character that has sleep paralysis,
Yeah.
and if I had that every night, I would be guzzling caffeine at 2 a.m. too. I wouldn't want to sleep either.
Right? I know. My husband has that too. I don't know if he ever sees, because I've seen like not the jokes, but like memes about like the sleep paralysis demon or whatever.
Yeah, right.
I don't know if he sees anything, but I know like every now and then he just says like he's awake and he like wants to move, but like can't move at
Right.
all, no
Yeah, that
matter how
sounds
hard
like
he
a mild
tries.
form of it. I did read
Yeah.
as research for the book, I did read a lot of interviews with people that have it. One of the most
Yeah.
interesting things to me was a married couple who has the same hallucinations. They'll have a hallucination of a cat with red eyes on their bed. And they'll
Oh
wake up
my
and be like,
God.
"Did you see?" And they'll be like, "Yeah." And so it's a really, I think there's a lot of facets of the mind we just have no
Wow.
understanding of whatsoever.
Yeah. Yeah.
So
I think
yeah, it's the most interesting mystery to me, the mind. It's way more interesting than anything
totally.
else with science.
Yeah. I think that's why I love psychological thrillers so much,
Yeah.
because sometimes it kind of feels like it's acknowledging that part that like we don't always totally know what's going on, even in our own minds.
Yeah, or like never. like
Or
like you
never. Yeah.
ask people their incentives or why they believe what they believe. Like
Yeah.
they'll have no idea. They may have one answer and they'd be like, okay, but why do you believe that? And they're like, bah,
Right.
no
Right. Yeah.
idea.
And then like when it's something that feels like part of your identity, that's when people get like crazy defensive about it and
Oh
like
yeah, like with the
can't handle a
election
conversation.
recently. I mean, it's pretty
Yes.
nuts. Friends on both sides of the aisle that I have are just like, I've never seen anything
Yep.
like it. I've
Yeah.
never seen the depression and I've never seen the elation. And
Oh,
I'm like,
right.
it's going to be boring. Like that, the most ironic outcome to anything is always the most likely. So having a
Yeah.
boring 4 years is probably the most ironic outcome. I think that's probably what's going to happen.
That's what I am telling myself. I'm just telling myself like nothing changes quickly in government on either side of the extremes. Like we'll
No,
be
our founding
okay.
fathers designed it. Honestly, Kate, the Constitution. I mean, sometimes I'll catch myself. This is such a nerdy thing to say. It reminds me of Lisa on The Simpsons. Do you remember
Mm-hmm.
she's having a dream and it's George Washington? She's like, "Don't leave George Washington." And Bart's walking by brushing his teeth. He's like, "Don't leave George Washington. Even your dreams are nerdy and boring." So
That's
like every
amazing.
once in a while, I'll just think about some aspect of the Constitution and just it'll blow my mind. Like I'll just be like, I
Yeah.
can't believe human beings thought of this. It's 15 pages. It's nothing, but it's like it's really the pinnacle of the human mind. And so our
Yeah.
founding fathers set up the Constitution in the country specifically to prevent a dictator from ever taking power. Because during the Constitutional Convention, John Adams, he was having correspondence with his wife, and Abigail, almost as a postscript, wrote to him and said, "Just remember that all men would be tyrants if they could." And John said that this stuck with him and just like it haunted him during the
I
Constitutional
bet.
Convention. So that's where really what our system is set up to prevent is all men would
Yeah.
be tyrants if they could. So I'm not scared of America falling into tyranny. I'm more scared of America abandoning the intellect, like books. Like when
Yeah.
TikTok came out, book reading dropped to something like 19%, and
Oh
something
my
like
God.
it was some crazy number. I don't remember the specific, but it was like 54% of Americans said they don't read even one book a year. And so
I
I'm more
know.
scared of that. I'm more scared of people devaluing the intellect and becoming automatons.
Yeah. I'm gonna have to agree with you. I like that. I like that take. I like that approach. Uh, and I did an episode a little while ago about empathy as well, because like there's been so many studies that even show reading fiction like broadens your empathy because you're having
Yeah.
like experiences through a character that like you may never have in your lifetime, where like you might learn something about a culture that like you don't have a friend in that culture, and so you don't know about that. So yeah, I'm with you. I
Well,
also though
yeah.
I'm sure TikTok took away from my book reading time, but somehow I still managed to fit them
Did you
in.
good? I've always been embarrassed of social media, like posting and like, "Hey, everybody, look
Yeah,
at me." So I've never really gotten into it very much.
yeah,
But
yeah,
yeah, I can see the value. I do like on Twitter, which is called X now. There's a lot of
yeah,
scholars I follow, and a lot of times
yeah,
when I reach out to them, they reach back, and so I do like that aspect of it.
yeah, yeah. It can be useful, that's for sure. I didn't really even post that much. I would be what you probably called a lurker on social media for a while on like my personal account.
Uh-huh.
And then it was just finding Bookstagram and actually Book Talk. So that's like kind of the nice thing. A lot of my TikTok is Book Talk as well. So it's still
I've
like
heard of that.
finding
I've heard
those
TikTok's
people.
like a real like force in the book world now.
It is. It
Yeah.
really is. It's kind of impressive. I'm trying to think of, there was something a few months ago, like someone trying to ban more books, and it is cool seeing the way that I think TikTok is more positive overall, because I saw someone KJ Miller on TikTok, for anyone who like likes to hear kind of like social commentary thoughts.
Uh-huh.
She was talking about how she started enjoying TikTok more, and she feels like it's because that algorithm is so geared towards what you like, the things that like you enjoy, where
Mhm.
like so many of her Instagram and YouTube comments are about hate.
Ah.
And so kind of just the idea that this was, and I don't know if that's true, but it fits because it's something I'd been noticing more. Like the TikTok comment section definitely seemed a lot nicer than what I was seeing on Instagram, even in my own algorithm. So
Yeah.
it's
Interesting.
definitely interesting. Yeah.
Instagram's
But
like it's like mini OnlyFans now. I just get like what are clearly AI created women
yes.
spamming me all day.
And their bio says not AI. And you're like,
Yeah, not
normally
AI.
people don't put that in their bio.
Yeah, only an AI would say not AI. It's true.
Yeah, totally. um, well, another big part of what the book explores is like Sophie's trauma and
Mhm.
everything that could mean. And you've kind of talked about with that Batman scene being um, so inspirational for it. I definitely am seeing it now more in the kind of ways that you talk about Sophie in the book, and how there's even a part that discusses like, and if she learns to dissociate for so long, it could lead to addictive behaviors.
Mhm.
Just like definitely really explores PTSD and the trauma around her. Is that something you researched, or is that just kind of like from what you were involved in with your work as a
No,
lawyer?
no, no, it's me. I have trauma.
Oh, okay. It's
I have, who
you.
doesn't have who gets out of this without trauma? I want to meet that
Right.
person. I'm sure
Yeah.
there's somebody.
Same.
There's got to be somebody that like grows into adulthood normally, but
Yes.
I haven't met
Yes.
anybody yet. So
I
we
know.
all have trauma. I've been in trauma therapy now for about 11 years, and
Oh, wow.
it's the best investment I've ever made. Just investing in
Mhm.
yourself and getting through that. And like,
Mhm.
it's the weirdest stuff because you go back and it's not like all these new memories flooded me. I remember all this stuff,
Right.
but like you reevaluate them with like a
Mhm.
healed mind and you realize like, hey, that's pretty screwed up what happened to me. And then you
Mhm.
confront the people and then you cut out the toxic people. And it's
Yes.
been such an important journey for me that I try to capture
Yeah.
that in all my books because nobody
Yeah.
ever talks about that, especially men. I used to be a boxer. You know what I mean?
Right.
Like, could you imagine
Yeah.
people like, nobody talks about their feelings. There'd be dudes crying in the locker room and like, hey, what's wrong? And they wouldn't talk about it. The
Right.
first person I ever heard talk about it was Mike Tyson. And
Yeah.
somebody said, why are you crying? Because he was crying in the locker room. And he said, because I don't like the person I have to become to fight. That's
Yeah.
trauma. That is
That
trauma.
is. It
And we
is.
weren't allowed to talk about it then. So I really love this culture opening up and
Yes.
allowing men to cry and feel trauma and feel empathy. I think it's something's shifted in the culture that I think is really positive.
Mhm. Yeah. That makes sense, or it makes sense why basically I did therapy for a really long time as well for complex PTSD. So
Mhm.
a lot of the scenes I was like, oh, I remember like having these conversations, or like you're saying, like sometimes it's not that you didn't have the memory before. It's just that through a different experience you have with a person, or just something going different, all of a sudden you have new perspective
Yeah.
on some of the things that happened, and it can change huge things, like just like that.
And the thing is, nobody from your past that you have to cut out understands why. They
Correct.
take it as like a personal attack. They don't understand, like, I'm on a journey healing myself and I can't have you as part
Mhm.
of that. I'm not going to be mean to you, but I just
Right.
can't have you as part of that. And so
Yeah.
that's been the hardest part for me, is cutting out people that I
Right.
feel
Is
like truly do love me, but I just can't be around them anymore.
that. Yeah, I'm really glad you say that, because that's the hardest thing for me too. There are people I'm no contact with as well, and every now and then I'll have like the conversation with myself where I'm like kind of talking to my inner child, kind of talking to my adult self, like both. But it's like, sometimes it's like, I know that I am in a place where this person couldn't actively like hurt me, or like gaslighting was the big thing. There was a lot of gaslighting and
Yeah.
brainwashing growing up. And so sometimes I'm like, well, I know as an adult, they couldn't do that to me again if I engaged in a relationship with them.
Hmm.
But then like I think of the things that I'm still going to have to put up with, and it's like I don't want to spend my time that way, even though they think that they love me by crossing boundaries over and over and over again.
Yeah.
So it's cool to hear you say that, because same thing. Every now and then you like, I think especially too, because like if you've been hurt, you probably are also sometimes thinking more about like, I'm not just turning around and hurting people to hurt them back, right?
Yeah.
And but sometimes, like you're saying, it's just like I only have so much time in my life, and like I just don't want this in my life.
Right. Right. Yeah. The strongest people I've ever met are the ones that have been hurt really bad, but they don't take that hurt
Mhm.
out on other people. I think
Yeah.
that's the most important life skill to teach.
Yeah. Which is cool, because that's also circularly kind of goes back to what Piper's wanting to do
Yeah.
with her career in the book
Yeah.
as
Oh,
well.
absolutely. I 100% believe in karma. I don't know if it's called karma. I don't know if it's scientific
Yeah.
or if it's something else, but like there was one thing I read that this is one of my favorite stories, but there was a guy, this was here in Utah. There was a guy
Mm-hmm.
who saw, she was a 5-year-old, she was 5 or 6, and she fell into this river near Sugar House Park, which is this park
Mm-hmm.
downtown in Salt Lake. But she fell in, and this guy, he was 25 or 26. He dove in, he saw her, pulled her out, saved her life, right? So like
Mm-hmm.
Fast forward, I think it was 24 years later. The guy's in his 50s. He's walking across the street in Boston and he's not paying
Mhm.
attention. He's on his phone. And this car is just speeding through this light. He doesn't see the car. Somebody grabs his jacket and pulls him back just as the car's passing through. It was the
Wow.
5-year-old girl he had saved 24 years before. Yeah.
That
Yeah.
is so
So,
cool.
in Boston. So like, yeah, I really believe there's something universal that just
Yeah.
kindness and empathy bring about. So whether
Right.
you may not get the reward right away, maybe it comes 24
No.
years later. So I really do believe in karma. I try to write my characters that way too. My villains
Yeah.
usually get what they deserve.
Yes. Yeah, I would agree with that.
Yeah.
I don't know if I probably can't even really talk about your villain. That's what, when I was writing my questions, I was like, a lot of it I think would be too much of a spoiler, but the fact that he ended up with the moniker the Creeper, perfect. Perfect. Very creepy villain. Like
Oh, good. Good. I'm glad I
so
tried. I
creepy.
tried.
Yeah.
Villains are the funnest
Well,
to write for me. Who I don't know.
oh,
The
I bet.
heroes are fine. You got to have heroes, but the villains are fun. There's something fun about not having any limits or any limitations at all.
Right. Yeah, just they're kind of acting however they want to in most cases.
Yeah, but the thing is that I've noticed with my villains and villains in general is they don't change, and that seems to be the real
Hmm.
difference between the hero and the villain. Is the hero can change in
Yes.
a story, the villain usually doesn't.
Yeah, pull that quote. I love that. Well, obviously, I loved the book. I'm really glad we got to talk about it. And now I have a book about Batman that I need to read.
Yeah.
Our dogs, I have a dog named Bruce Wayne and a dog named Harley Quinn. So when
No
you were saying
way!
that,
Nice.
yeah, Harley's cat, you might be able to see her. She's behind me sleeping right now. But when you
Nice.
were saying Bruce Wayne, I was like, is Bruce about to appear? He didn't this time, but but where can people follow you to stay up to date? Sounds like you don't love social media, but
I'm on it, like
yeah,
Instagram, Facebook, X. Yeah,
yeah.
I'm on all. I'm forced to be on all the stuff because you have to kind of. I thought about this with my daughter. I was not gonna. She's 14 now. I wasn't gonna give her
Hmm.
social media, but she's like
Hmm.
literally all my friends are on there. How am I gonna interact
Right.
with them? And so I had to give it to her. It's like you have to be
Yeah.
where everybody is. So I am
Right.
on social media, but yeah, I'd rather meet people in person. So just come up and say
Yeah.
hi if you see me.
Yeah. Awesome. Well, I'll put links to all of that in the show notes for everyone. Otherwise, thanks so much for talking with me.
Cool. Thank you, Kate. It was fun.